Hi, I'm Kaylee Whalen, an autistic transgender advocate, and I'm here in Chiantla, Guatemala to talk about autistic meltdowns, what you can do to try to prevent one, what to do if you might be having one, and if you're not autistic, how you can understand and support autistic people who do experience meltdowns. So I'm in this nice, calm, low sensory space, decompressing in the mountains of Los Cuchumatanes, and I'll be recording more of this video in my cabin and in another location. So thank you, and please stay tuned. Hello, I'm here in the Guatemalan highlands of Los Cuchumatanes, Todos Santos, near the city of Huehuetenango, where my grandmother is from. And even though it's August, it's incredibly cold. So I have this nice, cozy, crackling fire behind me. And I think it's a pretty apt metaphor for today's topic, autistic meltdowns. So why am I talking about this topic? I think it's important to build awareness of mental health struggles. People know my public face, the confidence I project as an advocate and public speaker, but they don't know what goes on behind the scenes with my mental health, including autistic meltdowns. So what is an autistic meltdown? I really don't think many non-autistic people understand autistic meltdowns, and that's a big reason I'm talking about the topic. I struggle, like almost all autistic people, with getting through my day, from difficulty with managing energy levels and sensory input, to struggling with social situations and physical and sensory overload from unpleasant sensations. Sometimes the stress, anxiety, and/or sensory overload of this struggle accumulates to the point of having an autistic meltdown.
This was it. This was my last shot. I'm gonna die here.
Meltdowns can feel very scary because they often involve a physical and mental partial or near total loss of control. Screaming, crying, stimming, and sometimes violent motions such as thrashing about or even hitting things. Some people experiencing autistic meltdowns can engage in self-harm, and some people have harmed others. Now, while I've never harmed others, I have scared other people while experiencing a meltdown. And on one very rare occasion, I have actually harmed myself on accident. So while a meltdown, though, can look scary from the outside, they're much scarier for the person experiencing one. And knowing what to do as an outsider is one reason I'm recording this video.
This is it. This is the end of the world.
Oh, that's just thunder.
What?
Yet as awful as meltdowns can feel and look, they're not entirely bad things because they specifically are a form of self-regulation. They're our body's defense mechanism to sensory overload and negative triggers in our environment. And a meltdown can help rebalance and restabilize us. Meltdowns are essentially self-defense, a fight-or-flight response to overwhelming and potentially harmful situations. Sometimes, in the case of needing to fight, they can help us get out of dangerous and abusive situations.
Why can't you just leave me alone?
James, move!
Yeah.
Ultimately, they help reset our bodies and minds to better function. Sometimes, if you're able to experience a meltdown in a safer space with the right support, they can be much more controlled and less overwhelming. And while after a meltdown, one can feel quite drained, there's also a sense of relief that our body has purged a lot of this unpleasant sensory input. So even if meltdowns aren't entirely negative, in my life they have put a serious strain on some relationships with other people, including negatively affecting my career and affecting hobbies and interests. That's included competed in roller derby, and that's including competing in the Miss International Queen pageant. One of the most public and awful meltdowns, and also the most recent public meltdown I experienced, was during the Miss International Queen pageant. It was a 2-week-long pageant, and I had to be around other transgender women. It's the world's most prestigious transgender pageant, and I was representing the United States as Miss USA. So for 2 weeks, I had to be surrounded by all these other women, and nonstop from about 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. So by day 4 and day 5, I was completely drained. And we were forced to get up at about 3 a.m., get on a plane, and having to go through airport security, being on camera before, during, and after the flight. When we arrive, we have to greet local officials in the island of Phuket, the tourism authority officials. And then we have to have lunch at a sponsor's restaurant. This is already sounding overwhelming, and it was. We had to have lunch at a sponsor's restaurant, do photo shoots. You can't even have peace at lunch because they're filming and everyone's on social media the whole time. Plus you have to be smiling the whole time. And then we had to get on a van, really the back of a pickup truck. They call them song taos in Thailand. And then I had to get on a boat in a swimsuit as a transgender woman to do a swimsuit photo shoot. Just saying all of that sounds overwhelming. And you can probably guess, maybe if you're transgender and or autistic, just how incredibly overwhelming that might feel. Now, any one of those things might cause someone to feel panicked and could trigger a meltdown, but the accumulation of all of those things, plus having to be in a space constantly surrounded by 23 other pageant queens and about 10 staff, well, I had a meltdown, and it was awful. And unfortunately, my complete loss of ability to talk, just crying, unable to kind of communicate about my needs, and being on a boat where everyone sees me, where cameras are rolling and everyone's on Instagram or Twitter. Let me just say, I was not happy in that moment. One of the girls actually went on Instagram and talked live about how Miss USA was acting out. And a photographer took a photo of me when I was trying to recover from the meltdown, when I finally could get off the boat and lay down on a beach chair. I'll put it up on screen, but this is my least favorite photo. It's not the glamorous photos of me in the pageant, because this is what it's like when an autistic person experiences a meltdown. In this video, I'll be sharing some other very personal experiences. And I'm doing this because, like I said, maybe it'll help build empathy and understanding of other non-autistic people who don't understand what goes on behind the scenes, and people who may have seen my public face, maybe as Miss USA or as a public speaker, but not know what goes behind the scenes with my mental health. I've also watched and researched the experiences and advice of other autistic adults who've made content about meltdowns. And in this research, I've also unfortunately stumbled across parents of autistic children posting videos of their children having meltdowns. And to those parents, please stop. That's really harmful. You're not helping autistic people. That child is not consenting. That is horrific experience. And you're causing harm to the autistic community, not awareness. As my friend Eric Garcia, an autistic journalist and author of We're Not Broken, Changing the Autism Conversation, had to say about Meltdown videos. As a journalist, I truly hate Meltdown videos because they violate one of our core tenets in journalism, which is minimize harm. We are constantly told to ask for consent, and no, parents' consent isn't a proxy for traumatic events. So, social strain and sensory overload. Many seemingly simple things which non-autistic people take for granted, like having a conversation with a person I don't know well, can be very draining and overwhelming to me. Sensory issues like clothing feeling too tight on my body, strong smells including flowers, perfumes, or cleaning solutions, a TV being on in the background when I'm trying to listen or participate in a conversation, or the music being too loud. All of these things can create an increasingly uncomfortable and even painful experience. Then there are my many sensory aversions and dietary restrictions which greatly affect my mental and physical health. I've recorded an entire video about my struggles with food, diet, anxiety, and travel. So check that one out. But suffice it to say that I'm managing my diet and my sensory issues around food 24/7, and that's a very draining experience. Now, add to these sensory issues social anxiety, anxiety from work stress, anxiety from travel. Even being in group settings with friends that I know quite well can be draining, let alone social situations with people I don't know very well or networking, say at a conference. Now, in addition to this, other stressors can include marginalization and discrimination. I'm autistic. I'm also trans and non-binary. I'm also Latinx. And I know what it's like to experience harassment and bullying and discrimination for my identity in my professional work, even from my colleagues in movement work, and from online cyberbullying and harassment. My video about conversion therapy led to prolonged harassment and bullying from TERFs that is still ongoing, trans exclusionary radical feminists, otherwise known as people who claim to be feminists while their only goal in life is to hate on trans people like me. They've been trolling me nonstop and still are at the time of recording this video. So all of those stressors, those invalidations, the social anxiety, all of those things can contribute to a meltdown. Now, the stress from travel and change in schedules can contribute to a meltdown. I'm a full-time traveler. I've now traveled to 7 different countries in 15 months of nonstop travel. Well, there was a break in between for COVID, but 15 months, 7 countries, that's a lot of change. I recorded an entire video about dealing with anxiety and travel stress for LGBTQIA+ and neurodivergent people. And in that video, I talk about doing things to prevent meltdowns. However, in this video, I'm going to go into much more depth. So in addition to what I've discussed with travel and social situations, work stress, sometimes triggers are a lot less obvious. And instead of major things triggering a meltdown, sometimes it's minor things. The weather changed. You thought the dishwasher ran overnight, but it didn't. You couldn't find your keys and were 10 minutes late getting out the door. These little things can add up over the course of a day, and eventually one of them, like the metaphorical straw that broke the camel's back, can lead to a full-on meltdown. I sometimes think of meltdowns like the game Jenga. Each potential trigger you experience, large and small, is a block you remove and stack on top of the tower. Remove enough blocks and the tower inevitably topples over. And once that tower topples, you can't stop it, and it'll take a long time to pick up the pieces and rebuild. Other disabled people use spoon theory, which is the idea that you start your day with so much energy or spoons, and each potentially triggering, stressful, traumatic, anxiety-inducing event can take away a spoon. So at the end of the day, or midday, because often it's hard for a disabled autistic person to get through their full day, when you're out of spoons, that's when a meltdown can occur. It's why a lot of autistic people like spoon imagery, including the logo for my favorite autistic organization I currently work with, which is the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network. So they have this cute little dragonfly, spoony dragonfly logo. Meltdown prevention. One acronym that's used beyond the autistic community to help someone remember potential environmental and social triggers for mental and physical health problems is HALT. H-A-L-T. It stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. H, hungry, which can also be hydration. Did you eat enough? How is your hydration level? Does your body need food, or are you feeling pain from food? Angry, also anxiety. Are you experiencing stress because of a certain situation and need to remove yourself from the situation? Is there a way to de-escalate that stress? L, lonely. Well, some autistic people like being alone, but all of us need supports and community. And not having supports and community makes it harder for us to manage our day-to-day, and sometimes we want to be alone, and we need to recognize that it's okay to be alone, but loneliness can occur. T, tired. Did we sleep enough? Do we need a nap? Can we go into a space to rest or meditate? So HALT can help you in a stressful situation stop and think. What are the triggers that might be leading to a meltdown? Now, it's not totally comprehensive about many of the experiences that are unique to autistic people, but it's a good starting point. Preparing yourself for change in unexpected situations. One unique aspect of the autistic experience is many of us find comfort in routines and familiarity. Change is difficult for us, including changes in plans, changes in diet, changes in the setting or situation we're in, and changes in our daily schedule. I already recorded an entire video about anxiety over change, especially while traveling, so check it out. But I'll be brief and just give an extra tip here, which is one of the most important things to prevent meltdowns on any day, including while traveling, is to be prepared. Have backup plans and carry things with you that might help you in the case of, let's say, your diet, having extra food on hand, having backup dietary plans, knowing the restaurant ahead of time, having a backup and second backup restaurant. Also, being okay with being accused of being an overpacker. I'll bring essentially an overnight bag for hanging out with someone for just a few hours, just in case something happens. I'll carry 2 suitcases for travel when, one might suffice, but I want to have every situation covered.
What's this? I said take only what you need to survive.
It's my industrial strength hairdryer, and I can't live without it.
And a lot of travelers, not me though, a lot of travel vloggers, bloggers will, pack light, be flexible as you go. For me, no. That's horrible advice. I think it's pretty ableist. And some of the kind of really icky mistreatment I've faced is people making comments on what I pack or how much I pack, because I pack those things to be prepared for situations that could potentially trigger meltdowns. Food, extra clothing, extra medications, all sorts of things. stimming, and sensory self-regulation throughout the day. Another unique and important part of the autistic experience is sensory processing. As I've mentioned in this and other videos, autistic people can be hypersensitive to certain sensory input that may barely register to non-autistic people. And one of the most important ways to regulate is through stimming, otherwise known as self-stimulating behavior. Now, you might see me flipping with my hair. Sometimes I have a little autistic stimming pendant that I wear around my neck. And all forms of self-stimulating, stimming behavior by autistic people can include rocking back and forth, pacing.
Star's notable stims are chewing her wand, flapping her hands, bouncing up and down, gargoyle sitting, and using raptor hands.
Or in the case of Entrapta, my gal from She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, spinning around in a chair.
Experiment has been more effective than I could ever have dreamed. This proves my hypothesis correct. With the black...
So, stimming, all of these things can help release and calm tension from unpleasant stimulus. Another important part of self-regulation is engaging in special interests. Special interests give us the ability to focus on something we're deeply passionate about, and that focus can help relax and recharge us from unpleasant stimulus. Personally, no surprise here, I have a very strong special interest in animation, especially animation with neurodivergent and LGBTQIA+ representation. So here's looking at you, Owl House, She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, and yes, Star versus the forces of evil.
Totally.
So, one of my gals, She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, has Entrapta. And Entrapta is canonically autistic, and one of her special interests is robots.
Hello to you too.
So I particularly am drawn to Entrapta because for much of my life, robots were also a special interest of mine. I was on the bocce team in high school. I was in the robotics lab at my high school, and I began a mechanical engineering program studying robotics at Rice University. So, but just to finish off this section before I go too off the rails on my special interests, a third form of sensory regulation is taking time for sensory breaks, finding calming, soothing, quiet places to relax. And I'll roll some video of in the mountains here in the highlands of Guatemala, which has been quite a soothing place to relax. So while mountains might not always be accessible to you, noise blocking earbuds or headphones might be, turning off the lights, finding a place to meditate, possibly snuggling under the covers in a weighted blanket, or having a plush. All of these things can help regulate unpleasant sensory sensations and sensory overload to prevent a meltdown. Preceding the meltdown, knowing the warning signs. Okay, so sometimes no matter what you do to prevent a meltdown from occurring, one might happen anyways. So what are the warning signs of when a meltdown is coming? Well, meltdowns, as I mentioned earlier, are a form of self-defense. Like other forms of fight or flight triggers, there's adrenaline pumping through your body, and many of the same signs of that are present. Increased heart rate, breathing heavier, feeling jittery, pupils dilated, all that stuff. For autistic people, sensory overload may also come in the form of headaches, migraines, physical pain. I often have physical pain around my eyes from too much light and sensory input, like those wonderful lights right in front of me during this video. Finally, one of the other very important warning signs of a meltdown is catastrophic or circular thinking. This is thinking that the world is tumbling down around us, that we're facing the worst crisis we've ever experienced. It may come in the form of imposter syndrome, where we feel like we can in no way accomplish the tasks that are handed to us in our career or in our personal hobbies and interests. And this catastrophic thinking can lead to us feel like we need to fix the situation now. We get jittery, we get the adrenaline, it needs to be solved. And that is a time to realize that you are experiencing triggers that very likely can lead to a meltdown. Instead of trying to fix that situation right away, we need to prepare for a potential meltdown and remove ourselves from that situation, and possibly also reach out to someone to support you, because a big part of catastrophic and circular thinking is we often feel we're alone with no one to support us. So one thing I try to think about when I'm experiencing catastrophic thinking, when the world feels like it's crumbling down around me, I think of David Bowie, because as he said, "As the world falls down, I'll be there for you." And Bowie, I know you'll always be there for me in my heart. So once you're having a meltdown, what can you do? So this is the hardest part of this video, because meltdowns, as I've mentioned, are a near or total loss of control. Mostly what you can do during a meltdown is try to reduce harm. Remove yourself from any situation that might be dangerous, where you might possibly harm yourself, or in worst cases, harm others. Having a release for pent-up anger, frustration, energy that's safer. You know, punching or screaming into a pillow, throwing something soft, having something like a stress ball you can squeeze, having a plush you can hug, having noise-blocking earbuds. Any of those things can help, but most of the way you can reduce the harm of a meltdown is knowing the warning signs and having removed yourself from the situation first to a safer situation. How to support someone having an autistic meltdown. One of the most important things is to be non-judgmental and to not try to calm the person down or prevent the meltdown from happening. It's already happening. The Jenga tower has already collapsed. The best thing you can do is be there if they need you and when they need you, and generally give that person space. Now, I have communicated to one of my friends who does support me that when I'm experiencing intense anxiety that may be leading to a meltdown, one of the things he helps me does is physically clear the space around me.
Mystic Room Self-Transform!
Now, that means maybe moving my phone. Unfortunately, I have thrown my phone when I'm experiencing a meltdown. I have broken multiple cell phones from meltdowns because it was the closest thing at hand and I really needed to throw something. So having something soft and squishy like a stress ball. Now, I don't like throwing my plushes, but I've done it. Bia is very resilient and forgiving. But being there for that person in a non-judgmental way, not trying to touch them, that's definitely a no-no.
Don't you want a hug?
Not telling them to calm down, get control of yourself. I mean, we know that doesn't help. But being there when they're ready to support, and if they don't want someone around, giving them space. And if you want to know how to support someone having a meltdown, ask that person. If they're an autistic person in your life, everyone deals with meltdowns in a unique way. As we often say in the autistic community, When you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. So please, if you want to support someone, talk to them, get to know them, be non-judgmental, and be a friend. After a meltdown. One of the most important things after you experience a meltdown is to not feel guilty or judgmental. You needed that meltdown. It was necessary. It was part of your body's way to regulate stress and sensory overload. And while it may have felt scary, your body has now released a lot of that stress and tension. Now, afterwards, you're often going to feel quite drained. And you may need hours, days to rest. In that time, again, not trying to fix whatever situation led to the meltdown, realizing that it can probably wait. And having someone you can reach out to for support. Now, you may, as you're recovering from a meltdown, want to avoid any additional sensory input. You know, your body's still calming and releasing things, and it's going to take some time to complete that process. Sometimes it can be immediately cathartic, but just be prepared to be nice to yourself and give yourself time to rest. Maybe this is the time when a friend can support you and, if you consent, touch you in a positive way, such as a hug, you know, that makes you feel affirmed and happy.
King demands huggies too!
You know, I love hugs. I'm on the road a lot, traveling alone, so often I'll have a plush to hug, but there's nothing like having a friend to calm and support you if you feel totally drained and alone. So again, I hope this video has helped people. I have to admit, it's been very hard to get through a lot of my life not knowing what an autistic meltdown is, not knowing that I was autistic, and feeling often quite judgmental towards myself when I experienced a meltdown, thinking that I was immature or having a tantrum, that I was out of control and something was wrong with me. And I guess a big part of this video is to try to erase that stigma and to tell some of my story, because personally, I'm still coming to terms with being autistic and experiencing meltdowns and not being judgmental about it. So please, be kind to yourself. And thank you. Bye. Thank you for joining me for this video. If it helped you out or you had a tip of your own, please leave a comment in the comment section and give it a like. Also, I release new videos every Friday, so please subscribe and hit that notification bell to get notified of future videos. Thank you to everyone who supports me, including those who financially support me on Patreon. You can financially support me and help me produce these videos by going to patreon.com/Kaylee Whalen. And you can follow me on Instagram @Kaylee Whalen and Twitter @TransWorldView. Thank you for joining me. Bye.